We are devoting vast resources, minimizing the harm due to civilians that Hamas has forced into the role of human shields. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. Well, you could have fooled me. Because from what it looks like, it's like if you really wanted to go against Hamas, you could have. You could have sent in your ground troops, but you haven't. And so now you're constantly indiscriminate bombing and targeting the people and then hoping that you'll hit Hamas. Dummy bombs. That is what Israel has been using at least half of in order to attack Hamas within Gaza. But those dummy bombs have been hitting mostly innocent civilians within that tiny little strip of land that houses a densely populated people. Let's go to this tweet by Kim Iverson I want to get to, because she actually talks about something that I think is really important. And I just want to give a shout out to Sabby Sabs, because she showed me this. She was like, this is huge. And I'm like, you're right. This is huge. And then we can get into the article to talk about the details of it. So let me share this. All right. So this is from Kim Iverson. She says CNN was able to go into Gaza through Egypt without Israeli escorts. They're saying there is no safe place in Gaza, and the number of injured children is astonishing. They're also reporting that Israel is using dumb bombs, which are unguided and completely destroy the narrative that Israel is doing all it can to limit civilian casualties. I think this is an important point to bring out, that even people like Mark Regev was pointing out to Joy Reid when I was talking about that on Tuesday, was that he kept saying that we're doing all we can to minimize the civilian casualties. Well, as far as this is concerned, and as far as the report that I'm about to show you is concerned, that's a whole bunch of BS, because they are not doing what they can to limit the casualties. They are not limiting the amount of innocent lives that are lost within the Gaza Strip. And so this is something that I think that needs to be hammered home. A lot of people are now starting to realize that Israel really just does not care about the civilians in Gaza. And I think this is an important narrative that needs to be revealed. So this is out of CNN. It says exclusive: nearly half of the Israeli munitions dropped on Gaza are imprecise, dumb bombs, U.S. intelligence assessment finds. So let's get into it. It says nearly half of the air-to-ground munitions that Israel has used in Gaza in its war with Hamas since October 7th have been unguided, otherwise known as dumb bombs, according to a new U.S. intelligence assessment. The assessment, compiled by the Office of Director of National Intelligence and described by CNN by three sources who have it, says that about 40 to 45% of the 29,000 air-to-ground munitions Israel has used have been unguided. So I think this is very important. So let's continue. The rest have been precision-guided munitions. Unguided munitions are typically less precise and can pose a greater threat to civilians, especially in such a densely populated area like Gaza. The rate at which Israel is using the dumb bombs may be contributing to the soaring civilian death toll. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden said Israel had been engaged in indiscriminate bombing. So here's the thing. The Gaza Strip is really just a small strip of land that houses over 2.1 million people within a small area. When you have such a densely populated area, it's probably one of the most densely populated areas in the world. And so when you have an area like that, you're bound to hit some innocent people when you're using any type of munitions. But it's even worse when you're using dummy bombs or these unguided missiles that are supposed to target the people that you're supposed to be going after, but in reality, you're actually hitting innocent civilians. The thing about it is that the narrative that Israel has been trying to paint, especially through some of its genocidal officials, is that, oh, well, we're just trying to minimize the amount of innocent civilians that are taken out. But the thing is that they're missing, but I would argue they're missing on purpose. And that's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Excuse me. So let's continue on in the article. Asked for comment on the assessment, the IDF spokesperson Nir Dinar told CNN, "We do not address this type of munitions used." Major Karen Hagioff, an Israeli spokesperson, said on Wednesday that a military committed to international law and a moral code of conduct, as a military committed to international law and a moral code of conduct. I call BS on this statement already for reasons why I spoke about on Tuesday. We are devoting vast resources, minimizing the harm due to civilians that Hamas has forced into the role of human shields. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza. Well, you could have fooled me, because from what it looks like, it's like if you really wanted to go against Hamas, you could have. You could have sent in your ground troops, but you haven't. And so now you're constantly indiscriminate bombing and targeting the people and then hoping that you'll hit Hamas. So, like I said before, this is like a physician taking out a patient, unaliving them, as they say on TikTok, to get the tumor, to destroy the cancer. How is that actually treating the cancer? If you feel that Hamas is the problem, how is destroying the lives of the Palestinian people, how is that actually targeting them? And there's ways that you can be more surgical in this, but they don't want to be. So let's continue. It says, but experts told CNN that if Israel is using unguided munitions at the rate the U.S. believes they are, that undercuts the Israeli claim that they are trying to minimize civilian casualties. Quote, I am extremely surprised and concerned. That was from Brian Kastner, a former explosive ordnance disposal officer that now serves as Amnesty International Senior Advisor on Arms and Military Operations. He says that it's bad enough that they're using weapons when they are precisely hitting their targets. It's a massive civilian harm problem if they do not have the accuracy. And if you can't even get a benefit of the doubt, that the weapon is actually landing where the Israeli forces intended to. So it talks about the growing rift between Israel and the United States. And as we see, as Lloyd Austin actually talks about, the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, actually brought out that the more Israel actually succeeds in its bombing campaign of Gaza, the worse that Israel does as far as the narrative that is trying to paint of it's just trying to get rid of a terrorist. Because in reality, you're not getting rid of terrorists, you're destroying civilians. And so now that is causing a rift. Why? Because the United States and a lot of people within the West, and by people, I mean the actual civilians, the people in the streets, we are now calling not just for a ceasefire, but now we're growing more in our calls for the ending of the occupation, because there really is no justification for the actions of Israel. And so that's why they are starting to feel the heat. A lot of people are now calling into their representatives. They're calling into the office of their senators and Congress people and saying that you guys need to not only do a ceasefire, but if you guys are now getting money from a lot of these Israel lobbyists, well, we are not going to support you for re-election. And then on top of it, you have over $12 billion that was lost by companies like Starbucks. Starbucks literally lost $12 billion because of the boycotts that have been going on because they support Israeli illegal occupation. And so we're also going to be getting into that with Elbit Systems in the next segment. But the thing is that the public pressure is actually working. Public pressure works. Remember when we went back to the 1960s, when the Montgomery bus boycotts that were headed by people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The Montgomery bus boycotts were successful, but it took a year of pressure of boycotts in order for it to work. And so the thing is that this also requires sustained pressure. Well, the sustained pressure that's happening is actually working, especially in regards to putting pressure on our government. The thing is that people need to keep it up. Do not stop your boycotts. It's working. Do not stop divesting from some of these companies that are in league with the illegal occupation of Palestine. Do not stop putting pressure on elected officials and letting them know that they need to stop what they're doing. If not, they're going to lose their jobs. Because remember, once and for all, if we are truly the boss, we need to show them that we are the boss. Rip the reins of power away from the corporations. Make them more scared of us than they are of Raytheon and Boeing and what's the name of that? Vanguard and BlackRock and State Street. Make them more afraid of us than they are of Amazon. So yes. Says a growing rift between the two countries has opened over how the Israeli military is carrying out its operations in Gaza and its war against Hamas, which it launched after Hamas killed more than 1,200 Israelis on October 7th. What's funny about this? Not necessarily funny, but what's interesting about this whole thing is that on October 7th, it was 1,200 people that were killed by Hamas, and we're literally going to almost 20 times that amount being murdered by the state of Israel. Almost 20 times. We just hit over 20,000 murdered by Israel. By the way, from what I've heard, Hamas is only about 40,000 people out of 2.2 million people. Only about 40,000. If they actually targeted Hamas like they said they would have taken out half of Hamas by now. but it's not about Hamas. It was never about them. So this talks about how they're using dive bombing with dumb bombs. Basically, what dive bombing is from a aerial perspective. Instead of just dropping the bombs, what they do is that they go lower altitude and then they drop them, trying to be more precise, but it's still not as precise as a guided missile. So, unfortunately, then what happens is they still do some indiscriminate bombing, even though it's technically more precise. So it's like instead of just dropping it, they drag down, then drop it to try to be more precise. But in reality, that's just an excuse to still keep on using these unguided missiles as well. Yeah. So it says U.S. has also provided Israel with gun-guided munitions. It says including the Joint Direct Attack Munitions Guidance System. So these are JDAMs. And so the U.S. has provided approximately 3,000 JDAMs to Israel since October 7th. It says CNN previously reported and told Congress last month that it planned to transfer $320 million worth of Spice family kits. So they also have given targeting systems to Israel to use as well. So the narrative is shifted because Israel has really been sloppy when it comes to targeting Hamas. And so in regards to that, people are, this really, they in a sense, shot themselves in the foot. And people are waking up to who Israel really is and what they've been wanting to do. I have this gentleman that I found on TikTok, and he talks about munitions and things like that. There are a lot more combat veterans that are also talking about what's going on in Israel, and I think that's okay. There are a lot of them that are actually speaking out against what Israel is doing, and they're speaking about what's going on in the region from a combat veteran perspective. And I think that's also very important. This is why voices like Scott Ritter are so important, because once you start to hear the strategy and what they're using and how they're going about it, then this really gives you a more accurate perspective of how Israel feels about the Palestinian people, how it feels about preserving their lives, also the proper rules and engagement when it comes to conflict, military conflict. A lot of the rules and engagement that they are in using or lack thereof really shows the morality of the Israeli military, the IDF, and or shows the lack of morality that they really have. And it really undercuts their actions, undercut them saying that they're the most moral and ethical military in the world, when in reality, it is the complete opposite. So let me just share this really quick with you guys as well, because I think this is really important. And especially if you're somebody that was a combat veteran who's anti-imperialist, I think your voice also really matters in this space when it comes to talking about these issues as well. So shout out to this gentleman. I would like to have him on. I'll try to see if I can get him on, to talk about these things. But here we go.
Hey, if you're an American combat veteran and you're standing with Israel and not supporting the cause for Palestinian liberation, you need to fix yourself, because we're 5 weeks in and the grace period is over. And hey, I get it. If you question U.S. policy, Israeli policy, if you question the idea that Muslims are prone to terrorism, you might question your own service and have to get good with the fact that You sacrificed your youth and buried your friends for the sake of imperialist lies, which is cool, dude. Welcome to the club. You're in good company. Like, let's be real, guys. Come on. They're dropping 1,000-pound GBUs in residential neighborhoods. What the hell is that bullshit? In 10 to 15 years, when they do the first round of top secret declassification on this, everyone's going to be up in arms trying to pretend like, oh, no, they supported the Palestinian cause the whole time. They called for a ceasefire. No, they didn't. But they're going to wish they had, because we're not going to forget. And this conflict is also very much a war of narratives. And our role in that narrative is just to kind of be there, because it's very hard for racist special interests to paint an entire movement as terrorist sympathizers when you've got a bunch of decorated white boys. Yeah, sorry I brought race into it, but Islamophobia is not just about religion, it's about race. And if you look at the demographics that support Palestine, it's all cultures, ethnicities, and former occupations. And then on the other side, it's just rich white men for the most part. That frigging demographics never on the right side of history. But most importantly, as combat veterans, deep down, you know, it's war crimes. And how are those defensible? Freaking shape up, dude. Jesus.
So, yes, this is why it's important if you are a combat veteran. And, of course, if this subject does not trigger you, because I know there's a lot of people who are veterans who may have PTSD and have different issues like this. If it is triggering for you, then of course, you know, try to maintain your mental clarity. So, you know, shout out to you guys if you don't want to, but if you're able to, that's what I mean. Then if you can talk about these, then be more vocal about this and say, well, this is what Israel is doing on the ground. These are what my friends on the inside are telling me, and this is what is going on. Where, you know, the inconsistencies of what Israel's saying, especially Israeli officials like Mark Regev have been saying about the minimizing of civilian casualties. We all know that's a bunch of baloney, and so, you know, show us, you know, more exactly why it is a load of trash that they are speaking, because we see it through civilian eyes. I would like to see it through more expert eyes as well, if you guys can. So that's much appreciated. So what's going on right now, as far as Israel is concerned, this narrative that they're trying to be as careful as possible is a bunch of BS. So